Last year, the NFC East was one of the best divisions in football with the Commanders, Giants, Cowboys, and Eagles. So let's go ahead and see what every team has in store this year with their starting lineups, and we also have record predictions. Let's start with the last place team, Washington Commanders, and my favorite team in the NFL. And let's go ahead and talk about it first. I think we obviously got to talk about the big elephant in the room, that Daniel Snyder is no longer the owner of the Washington Commanders. Now, there's not much more to say other than I'm excited, and hopefully this means we're winning the Super Bowl. But I don't know. If it happens, it happens. But let's talk about this team. Let's talk about the additions, the departures. Let's start with the free agency. You get Andrew Wiley, who should be a solid right tackle. Nick Gates, who should be a solid center. You could possibly put him at guard, but from what I'm seeing in training camp, that Nick Gates is the center, and then hold on. Okay. Nick Gates would be the center, and Sadiq Charles, I believe, is there, would be the left guard. Then you get Cody Barton, who in my opinion should be the second linebacker on the team and not David Mayo. And I'm excited for Cody Barton. And then also you have the backup Jacoby Brissett, who may start. He's not starting, but I think Sam Howell is the starter. But let's take a look at the draft picks, the important draft picks. I would say for this year, Emmanuel Forbes Jr., the first round pick, definitely got a lot of bit of criticism because they took him over Christian Gonzalez, and I definitely disagreed with the pick, but I understand why they brought in Emmanuel Forbes, and we'll talk about that a little later. Jartavius Martin, a guy who can kind of play everywhere in the secondary, free safety, he could play slot, nickel, if you really need him to, he can play on the outside. Ricky Stromberg, there's rumors that maybe he could be a starter if Nick Gates is left guard and he's center. But he's a guy that we could see this year due to injuries to other players. Hopefully not due to injuries, but he can kind of move everywhere on the inside of the offensive line. And then KJ Henry, who will not be starting due to Chase Young and Montez Sweat, but will definitely be a big part of the depth. And I think that's one of the reasons why this defensive line has been so good. We'll talk about that later, is the depth. And departures, Carson Wentz, not really going to mean much. Chase Roulier, though he was a very good center, just too injury prone. I think ever since he signed the big contract in 2020, I believe. He's only played like 10 games. Andrew Norwell isn't that good. Bobby McCain, though he was not bad. We brought in some replacements. Cam Sims, who I'm gonna miss a lot. A tall wide receiver, but we should be fine at receiver. And then Cole Holcomb, linebacker, who I wish we were able to bring back, because I thought, just having him and Jamin would be completely fine. And then also Trey Turner, who we released recently. Again, not that big of a deal. So let's go ahead and talk about last year's stats offensively. As we talk about this offense in 2022, they were 20th in total yards per game, 21st in total passing yards per game, 12th in total rushing yards per game, and 24th in points per game. So they didn't have the best offense, and I think that was clearly obvious, but they definitely tried to find their identity on the ground with their rushing, which, obviously is a reason why they were 12th in rushing yards per game. So we'll see what happens. Obviously now they have Eric Bieniemy, who's now, I should have put in the big additions, because now this, we'll see where we're going, because obviously the Chiefs are a passing offense. They obviously can still run the ball, but will there be more passing plays, passing creativity? But at the same time, I know Ron Rivera wants to run the ball with Brian Robinson, Antonio Gibson, rookie Chris Rodriguez. So we'll kind of see what happens there. Let's take a look now at the offense in the projected lineup based off our lads. So let's talk about this offensive line, who now Chris Paul wouldn't be, projected. I think it might still be Chris Paul. It might be Sadiq Charles at this point, but I made this a few days ago, before training camp start. But overall, I don't think this is a terrible offensive line. It should be better than last year. And the thing that interests me about this offensive line is that the Commanders never have really had offensive line issues. Now, I'm not saying we've had like amazing offensive lines. I mean, we haven't had an amazing offensive line probably since Trent Williams was traded, but it's never been a weak point. Even when, Brandon Sheriff was getting injured, Chase Roulier was getting injured. I think in 2021, 2021, we were down to like our fourth string center, and our offensive line was still doing completely fine. It wasn't the biggest worry in the world for us. But after last year, man, it's bad. You got Charles Leonard, who's not the best, but his 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 availability. That's the word I'm looking for. He doesn't really miss games. Chris Paul now, Sadiq Charles, young guards who are going to be fighting for that spot. We could see Ricky Stromberg fighting for guard spot, or Braden Daniels, another rookie. So that left guard spot is still up for grabs, and we'll see what happens there. Nick Gates, who came back from an injury, I believe it was last year, a big injury too. He's a solid center. He played pretty well once he got back from the injury. Obviously wasn't 100%, but he played well. And then Sam Cosme at right guard, drafted as a tackle, but moved inside and definitely should hopefully find a good spot at the guard position. And then you bring in Andrew Wiley from free agency, who was a big part in the playoffs, I would say, for the offensive line, and definitely the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs. So let's talk about what the Commanders on paper really good have in the offense, and that's their receiving room. You have Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel, De'Ami Brown, Michael Tinsley. You brought in Byron Pringle. You brought in all these other guys, and obviously this is their strong point in the offense, is their receiving core. You have Terry McLaurin, in my opinion, is a top 10 wide receiver. You have Jahan Dotson, who had an incredible, I would say, incredible, not I would say incredible, but a very good rookie campaign. You have Curtis Samuel, who should definitely get more touches, and he does what he does best. He'll get jet sweeps. He'll be used for his yak and his run after the catch, and he'll do his thing and his elusiveness. And then so let's talk about the quarterback situation now with Sam Howell. I'm confident in Sam Howell. Now, I'm a Commanders fan, so I don't want to talk about him in full excitement, as we've been down this road many times before. So I'll wait until he plays the field, but I'm confident in Sam Howell. I was a big fan of Sam Howell. He's my second best quarterback. I thought he was the second best quarterback coming out of that draft. And it's insane to me that he fell to the 5th round. When, Ritter, Malik Willis, and all those guys were going in the 2nd, 3rd rounds. I think it was the 3rd and 4th rounds, and all of a sudden he fell to the 5th for some reason. But I think he obviously has a really good deep ball. That was the big strength of his coming out of college, was that he has a strong arm. The ball pops out of his hand, and he has good deep ball accuracy. But from what we've seen in the one start he did have in the regular season, is that he was really connecting with his wide receivers. Jahan Dotson, I know, had definitely a good game that game, and he had a lot of anticipation, I would say, that game, which was really good. Now, the offense definitely seemed to be watered down just a tad bit for him, I would say. A lot of RPOs, read options, and all that stuff. But so there's still so much more to be seen, and obviously Eric Bieniemy's, probably maybe a little bit more complicated offense. So we'll see what happens there, but I think he'll be able to do that. He's still young. He's still just a, second year quarterback who was drafted in the 5th round. So expectations aren't sky high, but they're like, okay, do enough to get us to the playoffs. If Taylor Heineke, Carson Wentz, in one game of Sam Howell can just almost have us miss out on the playoffs, do enough to hopefully have a mid-tier quarterback, and the rest of the team could do the rest. I'm not expecting top 10. I'm not expecting top 15. But just do enough is the best way I could put it. So let's talk about the defense now. And you look at last year, they were one of the best defenses in the league after I think like the midway point. They weren't good to start, but 3rd in allowed total yards per game, which is good. Allowed total passing yards, they were 4th. Allowed total rushing yards, they were 11th. And allowed total points, they were 7th, which, again, very good. And they were definitely a top 10 defense and possibly top 5 defense, however you want to put it, however you want to rank your defenses. But it definitely showed. Obviously, the defensive line is still doing its thing. The defense versus the passing wise, it was good. But so they did last year. Let's talk about this team now and the players on it. Let's start with, I think we got to start with the defensive line. It's arguably a top 3 defensive line group in the NFL. You have the 2 Bama boys up front, and Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. You got the edge rusher guys, Montez Sweat, Chase Young, and I mean Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne, Montez Sweat. They're doing their thing. Deron Payne got his contract. He got up 11 sacks last year. Montez Sweat, who I think is still one of the most underrated defensive ends in the league, edge rushers in the league. I think he's definitely better than Chase Young as of now, and I think some people don't understand that. But Chase Young obviously is the big topic here when it talks about the defensive line. And I think he'll be back to rookie of the year. Now, I'm not saying he'll be like 100%. I'm not saying he's going to go out and get 8 sacks. But I think he'll be fine. I think he'll look like, okay, this is what we were seeing in a number 2 overall pick. Now, I don't think at this point he'll be a number 2 overall pick. But you're not gonna be upset. I think 8. Actually, no. I think 8 sacks is reasonable. I think 8 sacks is reasonable for Chase Young. He doesn't have his brace on in training camp, and ultimately, I think the explosiveness should be back, and I think hopefully the mentality in the mindset should be back. Because coming off an injury, especially an ACL injury, I know that can mess up somebody's just entire mentality and mind. Because, you're scared that's going to happen again. So, hopefully, the explosiveness, the brace isn't on, all that combines to a great season for Chase Young. Now you talk about and actually I want to talk about the depth of the defensive line. That's always been good. I think ever since 2020, when we had, Ryan Kerrigan and Tim Settle, it's always been a good depth, and one of the reasons why this defensive line has been so good. Obviously, you have 4 first-round picks, but I think the depth matters just as much. You have Casey Tuhill this year. You have KJ Henry, who they drafted in the 5th round. They have Fedarian Mathis, who they drafted in the 2nd round that got injured early on in the season last year. So, again, I'm excited to see this defensive line starters, obviously, but the depth and the backups is what I'm quite excited for as well. And now you talk about the linebackers, Jamin Davis, Cody Barton. Jamin Davis, drafted 1st round in 2021, and again, he was a raw prospect. He was an athletic linebacker, which I hope they use him better. I want to see him as QB spots. I want to see him going at, covering some of the guys. I want to see him blitzing up the middle because he has the speed. He's a speedy linebacker. He's a speedy player, and he can make some noise just with how athletic he is. And sometimes you don't always need the, obviously processing and knowing what's happening is what. But sometimes if you're running ape shit, sometimes it just helps. Now, he's 3 years in, and he's going into his 3rd season. Now, I'm not expecting him to be running like that anymore, but there has to be a level of combining everything, processing and awareness, but also going, just go, be explosive. So that's kind of my assessment on Jamin Davis, and I think with how the defense is run with usually one linebacker, I think Jamin Davis will be fine in the middle. And then you talk about the secondary, which obviously is very interesting. You talk about Kendall Fuller, who's been doing his thing for years now. Ever since his rookie 2nd year, he's been doing his thing. A solid guy on the outside, nothing crazy, but you can count on him. And you talk about the other guys. Well, let's talk about the safeties really quick before we talk about the rookies. Derek Force, who had an absolute great 2nd year, and hopefully continues that. And then Cam Curl, who honestly I think is the most important player on this defense, and that is Cameron Curl. We were terrible without Cameron Curl, and Derek Force wasn't the best without Cameron Curl. So, though I don't think he wears the green dot, usually that's for linebackers, his processing, his leadership, vocalness is so important to this defense, especially the secondary and the linebackers. It is so important to this defense, and hopefully we re-sign him and make sure he is here for a long time, but hopefully he stays healthy. And then you talk about the rookies, Jartavius Martin, Emmanuel Forbes. There's a reason why we drafted Emmanuel Forbes above Christian Gonzalez, and that is just that he gets turnovers. I don't know if he had the most picks, but I know he had the most pick sixes last year, and we were very bad at creating turnovers. We created just a tad bit, and also some of that thanks to Derek Force. So, getting Emmanuel Forbes, obviously, that was their big thing. Let's get somebody who can play make and create turnovers. And Jartavius Martin's a guy who could definitely just be that nickel guy, kind of play everywhere with how we like to use our lineups. Because we could go to different formations, we could go to different personnel, and I would expect that a little bit, just kind of mismatching these guys on the secondary. And one thing I said is that you can never have enough DBs. You can never have enough DBs, and that's why I was very excited with that Jartavius Martin pick in the second round when it was criticized by I think some of the fans, and then also Benjamin St. Juste. Hopefully he has a good third year. So let's go ahead and talk about the next. Well, actually, no. Record. I think the Washington Commanders will be going 9-8 this season with a ceiling of 11-3, of 11-6, and then a floor of 6-11. I think they'll be right in the middle of their ceiling and floor. So that's kind of where I'm feeling. I think we can split, the division, and ultimately a 9-8 record may as well possibly get you into the playoffs, and that's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a team that's gonna fight through every single game, make sure it's not a easy game for the other team, and ultimately hopefully get to the playoffs. And I just want a fighting chance. I want a fighting chance for the playoffs. And I think hopefully that's the thing, and hopefully with everything going on the football field and outside the football field, that's a real possibility. The New York Football Giants, who made the playoffs last year, surprisingly, I don't think many people saw that happening. First year Brian Daboll came in and absolutely ran circles around many teams. So let's go ahead and talk about their offseason, a little bit of last year, and let's talk about their roster now. Starting with their additions, which I think they had a great offseason. I think they had a good offseason. Bringing in Darren Waller, which is a low risk, high reward type of a deal. Because, I know it's a deal where they can easily opt out and get out of it. And maybe you get Darren Waller that we saw just a few years ago. Or maybe we get same old injury prone Darren Waller. Then you get Bobby Okereke, who I think is a great linebacker. The Colts always had some great linebackers over there. And bringing in Bobby Okereke definitely helps that defense. Paris Campbell, nice receiver. Bobby McCain, solid, safety. Ashawn Robinson, solid defensive lineman. And then you take a look at their draft, which I don't understand how they did it, but they did it. They get Deonte Banks in the first round, which was fine. Jalen Hyatt, and I believe the third round. So, which I think I think some people are overrating just a tad bit. Still, good player, and I'm still in shock that they got John Michael Schmitz. I don't know how. I've no idea how they got John Michael Schmitz. And then departures, at this point, was it going to be Saquon? Who knows? He's not. He's staying. Nick Gates, center for them. Kenny Galladay obviously didn't mean much to them. And then Richie James, who was a pretty solid receiver for them. So let's talk about their offense last year. They were 18th in total yards per game, 26th in total passing yards per game, 4th in total rushing yards per game, and they were 16th in total points per game. So their offense did enough. It is the best I could say. They scored points, they got yards, obviously they were very good on the ground, and they did enough to make the playoffs because their passing game wasn't that good, especially with the lack of talent they have on that offense. So, let's go ahead and talk about that. Offensive line, Andrew Thomas just got his big contract. That definitely one of the best left tackles in the league. Evan Neal, they drafted him top 10 last year, so we'll see how he works. He didn't have the best of seasons last year, so hopefully he can take that Andrew Thomas type of progression for Evan Neal, and then John Michael Schmitz, who I think is going to be a good center, and then the guards are like whatever. I do still have my worries about the interior offensive line, so we'll kind of see what happens with there. And then you talk about the receivers. They got a lot of slot receivers. They have no wide receiver one, and I wouldn't even classify Darren Waller as a wide receiver one. So that's their weak point of their just team in general, but mainly their offense, and why I think they'll be so limited offensively again, because they don't have the talent in the passing game to go up with these other players. So we'll kind of see what happens, or these other teams, I should say. Isaiah Hodgins definitely had a nice last half of the season last year with the Giants. Definitely had some clutch moments. I don't know how much that's gonna stay this year, but he's not a wide receiver one. I don't even know if he's a wide receiver two. Same thing with Paris Campbell and Darius Slayton. Good receivers. You wouldn't be, that's someone you want to have on your team. But I don't know if they're going to be great outside. I don't know if they're wide receiver twos in the NFL. So the receiving core definitely could use some work. Darren Waller is nice, but again, I don't even know if I see him as a wide receiver one, how you could see Travis Kelce as a wide receiver one, Mark Andrews as a wide receiver one. And then obviously you have Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. We know what Saquon Barkley is. He's the offense. He's the entire offense of the Giants. But Daniel Jones, who had a solid season. I mean, he definitely had a great season. But is he a little overrated? Probably. I wouldn't put him top 10. I don't even think I have him top 15. But he's done enough. I said this earlier, and I think it's the best way it is. But he's just average. He's not gonna elevate you to a Super Bowl. I don't think he's gonna elevate you to the NFC Championship game. I don't, if I'm gonna be completely honest. So he's good. He's fine. I mean, I know he got a big contract, which I understand the Giants kind of had to give him, because they're like, okay, what the flip are we gonna do at quarterback now, and especially in not a weaker quarterback draft, but they weren't gonna draft a quarterback wherever they were in the draft. So he's okay. He's just average. And again, another reason why I think this passing game will be so limited, and one of the reasons why I don't think the Giants will be this good this year. So let's talk about their defense. Looking last year, they were 25th in allowed total yards per game, 14th in allowed total passing yards per game, 26th in allowed total rushing yards, and 18th in allowed total points. On paper, this defense is good. They weren't the best last year, but obviously they got their players who are really good on this defense. And let's talk about this defensive line. Obviously, you got Dexter Lawrence. You got Sexy Dexy, one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL, defensive tackles, I have to say, in the NFL, and he's gonna get his. He's got his contract this year. He's doing his thing. Leonard Williams, not the same Leonard Williams we saw just a few years ago, but still a impactful player on that defensive line. A'Shawn Robinson, just a nice piece on that defensive line. And then you look at the outside linebackers. Kevon Thibodeau had a great rookie year. And in my opinion, I thought he was the best, edge rusher coming out of that draft class. So I hate to see him on the Giants, but he did his thing. Maybe a little things on social media, but he did his thing. Had some struggles here and there, like he would, but he ultimately showed that he can be a very, very scary edge rusher. And then you talk about Azeez Ojulari, who I believe was pretty injured this past year, if I'm not mistaken, but I think he's better than Kevon Thibodeau, and if he stays healthy, he can be another force off the edge that the Giants have on this defensive line that is good. It's a good defensive line, really is. And then talk about the linebackers. Again, nothing crazy. I like Bobby Okereke. Jared Davis is okay. I know he just got injured, I believe, but Bobby Okereke is a nice linebacker. I know he's a great linebacker, I should say, and but I'm not too worried. I'm not saying this is outstanding. Like this is a great linebacker spot or duo or for the Giants, but it's solid. It does the job, especially with how linebackers are in the NFL nowadays. And then you got this secondary. You have Xavier McKinney, who is probably one of the best safeties in the league. Bob McCain, who they just got free agency, he'll do his thing. And this is where I have my concerns with the Giants defense. Secondary, but more specifically the cornerbacks. Deontay Banks gonna do his thing. Dory Jackson is fine, nothing crazy in my opinion, but the nickel spot, the depth, I just don't know how good this is, and I think they could have some problems in the passing game, especially if the defensive line possibly isn't getting there. And I mean, if you compare them to Commanders' defensive line in general, better, but also the secondary, in my opinion, is a lot better, in my opinion. So I think they'll have those struggles. I think they're gonna have their struggles there, but we'll see what happens. So let's go ahead and talk about their record now, where again I said I don't believe the Giants will be that good. I think they're primed for regression. That's why I have them with a 6-11 record. Obviously not making the playoffs, but their ceiling is a 9-8, which I think is fair. but their floor is at 3-14, which I think they have a very hard schedule. I would say they have a very hard schedule. I have them splitting with. I think I have them splitting with the entire division, which is, again, that's obviously entirely possible. And I just this passing offense scares me. I think that's the biggest concern, is that I don't know how much they're gonna do on offense. Saquon is obviously gonna get his, but how much can Saquon really do? Especially, again, now that he's going to get a lot of carries, how much can he really do? And so that's kind of where I'm at. And obviously, I'm scared of their passing defense a little bit this year. But we'll see where everything is. So let's talk about their offseason, which I think they had a really good offseason. Obviously, trading for Brandon Cooks and Stephon Gilmore. And we'll talk about them more in depth when we do get to those in the depth chart, in the projected starters. And he drafted Mozzie Smith, Loon Schoonmaker, DeMarvion Overshown, who were some pretty good picks. Departures, Ezekiel Elliott, who honestly may be even coming back on a lesser deal. T.Y. Hilton, Dalton Schultz, and Noah Brown. So let's go ahead and now take a look at their offense. They obviously had a good offense. Total yards per game, 11th in the NFL. They were total passing yards per game, 14th. Total rushing yards, 9th. In total points per game, 4th. So again, one of the best offenses last year. And now let's look at their projected offense and talk about the next year. What could we see in the future here? Obviously, talking about their offensive line first, with Tyron Smith, one of the best left tackles in the league. Still injury prone just a tad bit. Got to worry about that a little bit. You have Tyler Smith, who had a pretty solid rookie season. Tyler Biadasz just doing his thing at center. Zach Martin, possibly the best guard in the NFL, 99 overall in Madden, which is the first time since I don't even know when. And then you have Terrence Steele, who, again, I think he's coming back from injury if I'm not mistaken. So that should definitely be huge for the Dallas Cowboys. Zach Martin is now holding out of training camp because he wants more money, which, I mean, I don't blame him. He's gone for the cheaper deals to help the Cowboys, and now he wants his money because he's getting older. I don't blame him. So now you talk about my favorite part of this offense is their receiving core. Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks. And definitely that trio helps. Michael Gallup, 2 years, I believe, removed off the ACL injury. We'll see how he comes back, because he wasn't the best last year. But they paid him a lot of money, and they expect him with the expectation that he'll be back to his form, what he was, I believe, in 2019, 2020? I think 2019, pre-injury. So, obviously, that's big for the Dallas Cowboys and Michael Gallup. CeeDee Lamb going to keep doing his thing from the slot, from the outside. I believe he's a top 10 receiver in the NFL. And obviously he's a very dangerous receiver. And then Brandon Cooks, who they just acquired from the Houston Texans. He's going to be more of a deep threat. He's going to be their speed guy, who they really didn't have before Brandon Cooks. CeeDee Lamb was, he's speedy, but not Brandon Cooks speed. CeeDee Lamb wasn't, you didn't really know him for a big part for his speed, but Brandon Cooks, you do. He's going to be the big deep threat here for the Dallas Cowboys, which is going to really help their offense immensely. You talk about the running back, Tony Pollard, who obviously is going to be huge in the passing game. He's going to be the starter, going to be getting those carries and touches. But that's the thing that worries me, is that I think Tony Pollard's a good running back. Don't get me wrong, but can he sustain that 3-down role? Can he? I have no idea. We haven't seen it. And as somebody who's had less touches, as somebody who obviously is more used in the passing game, it's going to be a big change to now possibly getting 3 downs. Getting almost every single snap and every single touch. And I'm not, I'm like, the other guys that they brought in don't move me. And that's a big reason why I think they'll bring back Ezekiel Elliott, because he'll be more of that power guy, be more of that guy that can tote the rock here and there. Now, obviously, Zeke's not the same Zeke, but definitely would help the Dallas Cowboys. And obviously, now you have the guy everybody likes to talk about, Dak Prescott, who, in my opinion, is a top 15 quarterback. I think he's a good quarterback, and he can definitely help take this team to a Super Bowl. And now that, last year was obviously very bad for him. League leading interceptions with 15 interceptions. Now, obviously, yeah, Some of them were on the receivers who had bad hands. Dalton Schultz and Noah Brown. They did not. They did not help. They did not help Dak Prescott's cause last year, and obviously that's a reason why they're gone. But I still think there was some. I still think that there's decision making problems. I wouldn't say problems, but that was a little bit worrying. That he made some bad decisions. I mean, you look at back in Week 16 versus the Commanders, he threw to an out route who, Kendall Fuller dropped it, and it probably would have been a pick six if he caught it, and then literally the next play, he threw the same thing, and it was a pick six. Now, could have that helped if it was a different play call? Yeah, but at the same time, you got to realize, bro, that just happened. Maybe you realize that maybe you shouldn't throw that next time, but I digress. I don't think Dak Prescott is going to be as bad as he was last year with the interceptions and all that. But I don't know if he'll fully come back to the 2021 season that he did have. He'll be in the middle. He'll help this team. He'll do his thing. But I don't think it's going to be out of this world. But I don't think this is going to be as bad as it was last year. So I think that's good for the Dallas Cowboys. Let's talk about their defense. Got to strap in for this one. Really got to strap in. Hold on. Let me get positioned here. They were 12th in allowed total yards per game, 8th in total allowed passing yards, 22nd in rushing yards, and 20th in points per game. No, they were high. They were high in allowed points per game, which is good. So obviously their defense was one of the best in the NFL last year, and it's going to be one of the best again this year because they didn't really lose too many players. You have let's talk about this defensive line. That's good. Obviously you got to talk about Micah Parsons, who's might be the best defensive player in the NFL at this point. Him, Aaron Donald, Nick Bosa. Many people you could, at this point, put in as the best defensive player in the NFL. And he's just going to cause havoc in the NFL, two offensive lines. And you can't really stop him, unfortunately, which is, that's the thing. And then you obviously have DeMarcus Lawrence, which is one of the more underrated players in the NFL. Because, you have Micah Parsons, so he gets kind of shit, he's under Micah Parsons' shadow when DeMarcus Lawrence is also a beast of his own. And you got Mozzie Smith and Osa Adigizua. I think I said his name right, and the interior defensive line, which, solid. Nothing crazy, but solid. And you get linebackers, Leighton Vander Esch and Damone Clark. They got some other guys who, could possibly start. Leighton Vander Esch, who is still good. Not the same as he was just a few years ago, but definitely a reliable linebacker, I would say, and definitely wouldn't be the biggest problem for the Dallas Cowboys. And I think one of their most interesting things is their secondary. Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, they're fine, but their depth at cornerback and just secondary in general compared to last year is amazing. You have Stephon Gilmore, Trevon Diggs, Jordan Lewis. They brought in these other guys. They drafted some guys. Their depth and overall, I wouldn't be worried to put almost anybody in their secondary out on the field if somebody got injured, if somebody needs a break. I'm fine with taking Trevon Diggs out for a series, honestly. I would be fine. Same thing with Stephon Gilmore. If I had to replace him with somebody else, I would be fine. I don't think it's going to change anything. Well, it's going to change things, but it shouldn't be as worrisome if somebody has to go out for a series or two because somebody's injured. And I think that's what's going to be the X factor part of this defense. Because this defensive line is going to be good. The pass rush is going to be good. Micah Parsons is going to terrorize the NFL. But this secondary can definitely come in and really catch you by surprise and make some big plays. Make some big plays. So let's now talk about the record for the Dallas Cowboys. Where I have them going 11-6. And they can definitely go 13-4 like I have them in the ceiling. And I think that they're going to definitely make the playoffs. Their floor could be 9-8. It depends how Dak Prescott does. It depends how the offensive line running game does. And so we'll see what happens. Let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, who I despise. But we're going to keep it fair. We're going to talk about how good their offseason was and how good their team is. Let's start with the additions. DeAndre Swift, which I know I said we're going to talk about how good this offseason was. In my opinion, was an overrated move. Obviously going to help a lot, but I would rather have Kenneth Gainwell and Rashad Penny by themselves. I think they'll be fine. I would start both of them before DeAndre Swift. Obviously, Rashad Penny, like I was talking about, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he is the starter. And then Terrell Edmonds from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And then they had a really good draft class. Jalen Carter, the 9th overall pick. I can't believe the Bears. I can't believe the Bears let them do that. But I digress. Nolan Smith. I can't believe the NFL let them do that. 30th pick. Come on now. Let's be serious here. Keely Ringo, who I in my opinion was the 5th best cornerback in the NFL. I know some people thought differently, but getting him in, I believe, day 3, love it. Sidney Brown, Tyler Steen. I think there were their 2 day 2 picks, 2nd round picks or 3rd round picks. I'm not too sure, but I know they're both day 2, which should definitely help in the depth of their team. And then you look at some of their departures. Definitely had some big guys lost. Javon Hargrave, now with 49ers, Isaac Seumalo, Miles Sanders, Andre Dillard, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, T.J. Edwards, and Kazir White, who I think all were important parts of this team next year. Now, fortunately, they do a good job of replacing them. So some of them will be more impactful than others, but we'll see at the end of the season. Let's talk about their offense. They were 3rd in total yards per game. Total passing yards per game were 9th in the NFL, 5th in total rushing yards, and 3rd in total points. Obviously, one of the best offenses in the league due to a few guys. Obviously, their offensive line, who is the best offensive line in the NFL, Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Jason Kelsey, Tyler Steen, and Lane Johnson. I don't know what there is to say about this offensive line other than it protects Jalen Hurts and it creates holes for running backs. And you obviously got 2 of the best offensive linemen in NFL history, I would say, in Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson, who are both, I believe, in their 30s, still, in theory, in their prime. And then you have Jordan Mailata, who they found from New Zealand. I'm in shock with how good this offensive line is. Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, who should be the future center once Jason Kelsey retires, and Tyler Steen, who's the rookie. And now you talk about this receiving core, which, maybe the slot doesn't look as appealing, even though Alameda Zacchaeus is a good slot guy. But obviously you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, 2 top 15 wide receivers in the NFL. The best wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 duo, I would say. I would say they would definitely be the best. I would go out and say. Well, no. Second best. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And so they have that. They have some good depth guys, and obviously A.J. Brown went off last year. I mean, Devontae Smith went off last year. Devontae Smith's a wide receiver 1. I don't know what else to say. And then obviously they got one of the best tight ends in the NFL in Dallas Goedert. And then they got Jalen Hurts, who broke out last year and had an insane season, a season I didn't see coming. He had a good season, obviously, not last year but the year before, and was doing his thing. But now, man, he went nuclear. He went nuclear in this past year, which obviously helps a lot. And now he's a possibly top 5 quarterback. I think he's the 6th best quarterback, but he's good. I don't know if you don't need to rank these guys, and obviously showed so much growth, but also he's one of the best passers already in the league, one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the league. Obviously he was a big threat on the ground, but he was an even bigger threat in the air. And I mean, I'm still kind of surprised how the Eagles didn't win the Super Bowl with how good he was in the Super Bowl. And I don't know what else to say, but other than he had a connection with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, and his passing game was on fire. He was making accurate throws, anticipation, and obviously sometimes you just threw it up to A.J. Brown and it worked. But at the same time, using your legs and really making plays there, he can do it all. He can run QB sneak. So that's kind of all I gotta say about this offense, because we know what this offense is. We know how good this offense is gonna be next year, and it's gonna be interesting. And again, DeAndre Swift, I think they should start. I think they should start Rashad Penny or Kenneth Gainwell in front of DeAndre Swift. Good receiving back, but when he's actually running as a pure runner, he's not that good. Let's talk about their defense. They were second in allowed total yards per game. They were first in allowed total passing yards, 17th in allowed total rushing yards, and they were 8th in allowed total points. So this defense, again, was one of the best in the NFL. The rushing defense definitely did not help. You could really tell that teams started to exploit it after that Commanders game in the middle of the year, where they were just running Brian Robinson. They were running Antonio Gibson. Now it showed early on. I think it was week 1 versus the Lions. The Lions were doing a thing in the second half, but it really started to take effect on the Eagles' defense after that Commanders game, I would say, and that's when they brought in those was it the Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph, or somebody else, 2 veteran defensive linemen. So let's talk about their defense now. And their defensive line, again, one of the best in the NFL. Brandon Graham, Fletcher Cox, Jalen Carter, Josh Sweat, obviously throw in Jordan Davis in there. They can mix match guys all they want every single day. They can throw guys in, take guys out, and everybody's going to be rested up. Brandon Graham, and Fletcher Cox, not in their prime anymore, but still 2 dangerously scary defensive linemen. Josh Sweat really came into his own these past few years as an edge rusher. And then you have rookie Jalen Carter, who's one of the best, rookies coming into the league. We'll see what happens off field. Was that a one-time thing? Was it not? Who knows? But the talent is undeniable. He's going to be a problem. And then Jordan Davis, though, I don't know how much, now after last year, obviously he was injured, but thinking about it, I don't know where his ceiling is and where his floor is. I think his floor is a lot higher than many other guys, because he's going to be an insane run stopper. But when it comes to the passing game, when it comes to pass rushing, I should say, how high does that go? But that's the thing. They have these other guys that can attack the passer a lot better than Jordan Davis. So whenever in passing situations, Jordan Davis is going to come out, Jalen Carter is going to come in, and they're going to be completely fine, which is just unfair. And then hold on, and then their linebackers, they're good. Again, nothing crazy. I don't think any NFC East team excels in their linebacker core. Nakobe Dean is solid. I think he'll be good. I think some people are overhyping him just a tad bit, but he'll be good. And then you got Nicholas Morrow, who's just a nice depth. And I definitely think losing T.J. Edwards definitely hurts a little bit. He was a good linebacker last year. And then you talk about their secondary, which confused me this entire offseason. I thought James Bradbury wasn't going to resign. I thought Darius Slay was going to be cut. And at the end of the day, they just kept everybody, and it didn't matter. And I was getting excited. I was like, oh my gosh, Darius Slay's not going to be on the Eagles anymore? James Bradbury's going to be gone? Yeah, no, that didn't happen. And they worked everything out, and obviously one of the best cornerback duos in the NFL. Obviously, Darius Slay, in my opinion, is probably a top 10 cornerback in the NFL. James Bradbury, not so much, but he's still solid. He's not the same as he was just a few years ago, but he's definitely going to be an impactful cornerback. Avonte Maddox at the nickel should be fine, and we'll see guys like Sidney Brown at the safety position, Terrell Evans, Reed Blankenship. So the secondary is definitely, I would say, a little top heavy. Not a little top heavy, but more top heavy than depth. And maybe that could come back and hurt them. Who knows? But they'll be fine. This defense is going to be a really good defense and should be a top 10 defense again next year. So we'll kind of see what happens there. So let's go ahead and talk about their record. 12-5. They could go 14-3. Heck, they could go 17-0. That's the scary part. They could try again and with their undefeated run. But I have 12-5 as their record. Ceiling 14-3, floor 10-7. This team's gonna be good. I don't think there's denying this, and there's no way they miss the playoffs. With Jalen Hurts, with this offense, with this defense, everything is in place for them to be such a dominant team again next year. So we'll see what happens, and that's what I think about the Philadelphia Eagles. The NFC East division standings, you saw the records before, but now we can just kind of take a look here with the division standings. The Eagles go 12-5, the Cowboys go 11-6, Commanders 9-8, and the Giants 6-11. That's how I predict these division standings. So Eagles and Cowboys, they make the playoffs. Commanders would be borderline in the playoffs. They would be like a 7th seed, possibly with that 9-8 record, I would say. And the Giants don't make the playoffs at 6-11. Again, anything could happen in this division. And obviously we know the history of back-to-back winners in the NFC East. That hasn't happened in like 20 years. And ironically enough, that was the Eagles who broke it. So I think the Eagles will break it again. So again, we'll see. Eagles and Cowboys, anybody could win the division between those two. I don't think the Commanders win the division, but I mean, who knows? Who knows? You know, they're only 3 games off. They're only 3 games off. You know, you win a few games, you sweep a team, maybe things go your way. And then the Giants, again, they can make the playoffs. I wouldn't be surprised. But I also wouldn't be surprised if this is a big regression season for the New York Giants compared to last year. So that's how I feel about everything with the division standings. So if you like this video, go ahead and leave a like, subscribe, and share it. Tell your friends. I don't know. And what do you think I got wrong about your favorite team in the NFC East? Different record? You know, am I overvaluing a player? Am I undervaluing a player on your favorite team? Go ahead. Let me know in the comments. And, you know, go ahead and watch out for my next divisional video. Yes, divisional. See you guys next time. Peace out.